We're looking at skeletal muscles on the anterior thigh, focusing on a right leg. I'm going to show you 10 muscles to practice with, and then I'll show you the key. So try to follow along and see if you can guess them as I talk. I'll go relatively quickly, but then I'll show you the key, and then we'll move into origin, insertion, and action. A lot of students struggle with origin, insertion, and action because it's a lot of information, but I try to group them together in different ways, especially when they're similar in their action because they're in their origin. Insertions tend to be close together so you can put them into groups to help you to remember them as you learn them for your class. I've been teaching anatomy for 24 years. I try to find simple ways to do it. It's not always easy with origin, insertions, and actions, but we do this by just piecing it together. And how do we do that? Let's just look at the anterior side of the thigh. I'll also throw in a study guide here if that helps you. Click on that. That'll guide you through some of these same pictures as well. It may not be the same models, charts, or pictures you have in your classroom, but it still helps with the naming, the OIAs, and just your general organization of learning and reviewing the muscles. So let's take a look. This one's opened up quite a bit on the proximal side. But when I look at 1 and 2, what I'm looking at is first Iliacus, and number 2 is my psoas major. So Iliacus will come around the iliac fossa, the ilium, and then psoas major is this big rod of a muscle. These two together, you'll often refer to those as Iliopsoas, but specifically Iliacus and psoas major. And then I have Pectineus. A lot of your models, it'll shrink it just based on the way the model is designed, the way the leg is sitting. That won't give it that appearance that it's opened up, but some charts will if they open up the leg. So I have Iliacus, psoas major, Pectineus, and then I have Adductor longus. Adductor longus, if there's a longus, there's a magnus, and magnus is deep to this, so I can't see it on here, but if I went medial, I can see it underneath number 6 here, which is Gracilis. So Adductor longus, and then Gracilis. What wraps over from one of our spines of the ilium comes all the way down to the medial side of the tibia. This is all Sartorius. Sartorius is our longest muscle in the body. Our largest by mass is gluteus maximus by mass. But the longest is Sartorius. Our smallest muscles are in our inner ear. So number 5, Sartorius. And then over the top on the lateral side that has this long band, this is tensor fascia lata. A lot of students will say tensor fascia lattae so they can remember like it's their coffee muscle. So number 7, tensor fascia lata, but it comes down and has this long tendinous band that we call the iliotibial band or tract, or IT band because it goes from the ilium to the tibia. So on the lateral side, tensor fascia latae. And then we start to look at my quadriceps, and this is 3 of the 4 quadriceps, so 4 heads. On the lateral side, Vastus lateralis. On the medial side, number 10, Vastus medialis. In the middle, Rectus femoris. Deep to this would be number 4, Vastus intermedius. So how'd you do? Let's take a look at a key here. So remember, I said Iliacus, that'll come up over the top of the ilium, so I can't see it because I got to go deep to my abdominal muscles because you can see external oblique here. And then psoas major is this big rod that comes up, and I covered it when I did abdominal muscles. And then I have Pectineus, number 3, Adductor longus. Deep to this on the medial side would be Adductor magnus, but I can't see it. It's covered by Gracilis. Our longest muscle, Sartorius, tensor fascia latae, number 7, so tensor fascia lata, and then 3 of our 4 quadriceps, Vastus lateralis, Vastus medialis, Rectus femoris. Now let's look at OIAs. As I cover OIAs, first starting with our Iliopsoas, so I break down Iliacus. Remember, we said it wraps on the top of iliac fossa, and then it goes down to my lesser trochanter of the femur. And its goal is to flex the hip. So its primary purpose is flexing the hip and the intervertebral joints. Notice it's the same when we look at psoas major. So that's why you often see them grouped together as Iliopsoas based on what they're trying to accomplish. Where psoas major, though, originates is going to be at the transverse processes when you look at your vertebrae down to the lumbar side. And then you get into pectineus. Remember pectineus? Now referring to when we look at the rami of the pubic bone, we said superior ramus and you have an inferior ramus, and that's what we use adductor longus to. So you start to bring in why we have these rami or these longer part of the bone, and it's to connect pectineus to start. It goes down to the femur, and our goal is to flex the hip and then adduct it. Versus adductor longus, we have a lot more movement for the hip, but now it's going from the inferior rami of the pubic bone and then drops down to the posterior side at the linea aspera of the femur. So this is a longer muscle. That's why we call it adductor longus. So I can get that full movement of my hips to flex, adduct, and give me medial rotation. So it's a lot of movement in conjunction with the sartorius. When you lift up your foot, you step on something, say you step on dog poop or gum, and you lift up and look at your foot and go, I stepped on something. You're usually using your adductor longus and your sartorius to do that because of the way you can move and rotate your hip and your knee. So we get into sartorius, leaving from the anterior superior iliac spine and dropping down to the tibial tuberosity on the medial surface here. And then remember, we said we get a lot of movement of the hip. So that we look at our first 5. Let's move on to the next 5. Gracilis, our most medial thigh muscle, is now at the inferior ramus as well, dropping down to the medial condyle. And again, knee flexion, a lot of hip rotation. Tensor fasciae latae, remember, is now on our lateral side. So it's coming from the anterior superior iliac spine, so similar to sartorius, and drops down with that primary ligament that we see, the iliotibial tract or band. And we use this for a lot of hip rotation. And then we get into some of our quads. If you look at our quads, knee extension, knee extension, knee extension. Where are they inserting? They all come together at the quadriceps tendon. So they're all dropping here at the tibial tuberosity with one tendon coming down. So a very powerful group of muscles. So vastus lateralis, the greater trochanter, the rectus femoris, another anterior, but now the inferior iliac spine versus we did superior for tensor fasciae latae and sartorius. Vastus medialis, linea aspera again. So remember that long ridge, that rough line down the posterior side of the femur helps with a lot of our connections when we think about how we have this force of the quadriceps. So this is OIAs. This is anterior side looking at a right leg. I hope you find this helpful. I've been teaching anatomy for 24 years. I try to simplify it in different ways. Hopefully just pictures and review is guidance enough to get you to practice what you have in the lab.